Hello, it is 4:44 on October 10th, 2001, when I'm recording this. This is one of my, usually bi-yearly, although I think this is technically the third one, this year, content update, where I basically just kind of go over, what's happened since the last content update, and, kind of some previews of what's going on in, what you can kind of expect from my content going forward. Or at least the stuff that I have planned. So, yeah, sorry. So, as you can tell, this is going to be off the cuff. I have a light outline for this. This is probably going to be pretty rambly, just to give you a fair warning. But, yeah, just to kind of let you, get you a little update of what to kind of expect. If you are listening to this on the podcast or channel, you might notice that there was, usually there should be a Hazel Town Story this week. However, I ended up being busier than I thought and not really having a good time to sit down and write the episode, because the next episode that is going to be scripted, it's not going to be, we are done with the arc that and I'll go over this more when I get to the Hazel Town Story bit of this. But we just finished an arc, and I didn't have something prepared, but it just happens that this is usually when I do a content update. So instead of an episode of Hazel Town Story that would have been rushed, I felt like I'll just give you one of these, and hopefully the one that'll go around Halloween, or actually the week of Halloween, will be a better written thing than I would give you if I, did it this week. So, other than that, let's see, where should we start? Well, we're going to start with just kind of a general streaming and / content creation kind of, status. So, this year has been a year of kind of me experimenting with things, just kind of trying to poke at some, possible, figure out where I want to, what I want to do, where am I in terms of content creation, just who I want to be. So this has been a interesting year for me, in particular. It is actually, I don't want to make this negative, but it has not exactly been the greatest year for me. I don't know if I brought it up during the last content update. I haven't really talked a lot about it because, one, it's not something I'd like to talk about because it wasn't a great thing. I should just preface this by saying everything's good right now for what I'm about to talk about, so this is not going to have a bad ending. But it is something I should bring up because it has been a cause of a lot of mental strain on me this year. Both of my parents came down or got COVID, because it's right in the middle of the COVID pandemic, which is still going on, which also is not helping things. But both my parents got COVID. Both of them were hospitalized for at least 2 weeks. My mom in particular spent 7 weeks in the hospital, 5 of those in the ICU. Almost got put on a ventilator. Thankfully, she didn't. And not knowing whether or not it was really shaky about things going on there, because especially they don't live local to me. They live relatively, they live within vicinity, but it's still far enough away that it was a little bit concerning, especially during times, of COVID, where it would be hard for me to even get there, much less be able to see them. But it was just a really rough mental time for me in terms of being very stressed and just having that on my mind a lot. Thankfully, everything's good, but it still caused a lot of stress. I've been having some relatively minor health things, in particular with, nothing major, disease-wise, but just I'm getting older, so, as you get older, things just start to ache, and it's been a particularly bad year about that. For that, work has been changing things up lately, and it's just been kind of stress-inducing there as well. So outside of my content creation life has been pretty stressful, although hopefully things are getting better. It's definitely during the health and the health portion. Like my parents are completely clear of that. My mother in particular just got a clean bill of health from her physician as of a few weeks ago. And my dad barely got scratched from it too. The hospital actually found out was him reacting poorly to the COVID medicine. Remdesivir, I believe it's called. But yeah, both of them are doing good now. Yeah, so that has been in the background and has caused me a bit of stress, and that I feel kind of makes it a little harder to focus on other things. So that is why one thing I'll talk about later, but I don't really have any. I'll just preface now by I don't really have any news on any new, because usually every 6 months I like to try something new. Don't really. This is not going to be this 6 month period going into May of next year is going to be more of a kind of refinement period. And actually, if anything, it's going to be paring down from stuff I have. But speaking of that, one other thing that has especially been on my mind to, especially since this year already was a little bit more of an experimental year, just with that stress-related thing, just to try and get something off of it. One thing that I have been really thinking about a lot lately is and especially this also is probably what spurred the experiment, the experimenting, but with, content-wise, is what do I want to be? Who am I, and what do I want my content to, what should be my content? Where are my key areas that I'm good at, and what should I focus on? And after, I guess, this entire year of kind of experimenting with things, really it all boils down to the fact that despite trying to slightly fight it by looking at newer things, I'm a retro streamer at heart. I'm a retro content creator at heart, and just kind of realized that's where I should be. I now have it that going forward, I really should just go put all my chips down into retro content. So Retro Rhapsody is going to continue to be the major, it's going to be the big stream thing. Media Delta will continue to exist to look at, although that one's kind of a mix between half new, half old. But yes, my content is mostly going to be focused on retro stuff, which is, I think, funny that is kind of a good thing, because retro is an incredibly expansive thing. You'd figure like, looking at older stuff is would be limiting, but actually it is it's a lot wider than you think. So definitely am not going to be running out of material anytime soon, and it gives me a little bit more of a focus that I can, it's good to have a focus so that I'm not just doing random stuff. And it's a little bit something that's, people are used to. So I've especially noticed that the streams that I've done, we're looking at newer stuff, like whether it be Teardown, or even as of the week that I'm doing this, Metroid Dread, which is, technically new old. But I don't get the feeling that people were particularly interested in me playing newer stuff, because I just didn't really have the feel for it. So I just kind of feel like I should really focus on my retro stuff. And one other thing that I really want to focus on is, part of the thing is like, what do I want to be? And one of the things is really trying to think about, what is my vibe? Like, what kind of tones should my content bring? And this is something that I've really started to think about, because I think I mentioned it last content update, and I think that was right when I got accepted. But I recently, as of this year, I joined a Twitch team, the Storytellers, which are it's an interesting team in terms of like composition, because at least from my point of view, because it is a group that, the circle that I should say, like the people that I growing up is a weird way to phrase it, but in terms of my content creation, growing up with like how the peers that I have for creating content mostly come from they're either current or ex-SA or something awful, which there is something awful had a very I don't want to say strict way of doing things, but there was coda to the way that something awful people like did their content, and it was a way of viewing things that it's just how I started out with. Trying to think of like an example that I could say, but it was a certain viewpoint, and with it being something awful, a lot of the people there that they weren't all like super negative people. But a lot of something awful content was very derisive, so to speak. It was a lot of focusing on poking fun at quote unquote bad games. It was a lot of like, hey, let's look at this game and so we can poke fun at it. And when I joined this team, a lot of the people I'm sure there had to be a few people there, but none of them were really they didn't have anything to do with SA. Also because of the fact that I am I don't want to say older because it's weird to say because I'm not that old. I'm, in fact, one thing that I'll be talking about is my birthday's coming up soon. I'll be turning 33, which is old in some specs, but actually not really when you're on the internet. Because a lot of the people that my peers in terms of content creation are around that same age. And a lot of the people and the storytellers I'm finding out are younger than that. It's a new generation of streamers. And a lot of the stuff that they do, it is an incredibly positive experience. They give an incredibly positive vibe to what they, what they do. And it's a completely different tone. Not that anyone else, I do have a fair few people that like do more positive stuff, but yeah, it's a different vibe there, and it's something that the more that I kind of get close to, get involved with that group, it's something that, and just kind of getting to know more streamers that were completely divorced from the something awful kind of mentality. It was kind of eye-opening for me, because it's like, part of my thing is that I'm trying to figure out what kind of vibe that I should... This is going back to what kind of vibe should I do for my content. And I really want to focus on positivity, so to speak. And I should say this with want to make this perfectly clear. Sometimes I feel like if you're going with really focusing on positivity, this could also... There is a sense of what you could call toxic positivity, which is, not being honest and just kind of not being open to just kind of criticizing, no, you can't criticize it because oh, don't be mean or something like that. I'm not saying that I'm not going to criticize things that aren't great or that bother me. But I do want to more focus on especially content that I feel actually brings something interesting to the table, is a way that I'd phrase it, where not always good games, quote unquote good games, I should say. Some of these are not exactly great, good example. I really like showing off games like Ernest Evans or games like Tower Juaga. Genpei Termiden is interesting. I've been recently playing, there is as of this recording recently, there was a Nintendo Switch re-release of Genpei, what's called in the US Genji, or in the West, Genji and the Heike clans. It's a very, it's not that great game, but it's at least kind of interesting. But that kind of game, that is one thing that I can be positive about, but also showcase the fact that it's not exactly a great game. But it's the kind of things that I want to be able to like say, hey, this thing or not even games, but stuff in Media Delta. I want to give things a chance and make it a little bit more, give it a little bit more positivity to it. And I want to be a laid back, kind of one of those streams you can have in the background. And you can just listen in, and you can, you know, it's nothing that's like super, like, I don't know how to phrase it, but just something that's like a good background thing, or watching it, being able to hopefully learn about something new that you might be interested to play or watch. And just kind of, you know, it's a more cozy experience, which is something that I kind of want to focus on. Not to say that my stuff was like super not cozy before, but it's something I really want to focus on. Is I want to like have a vibe that is something that people can get into. That's low kind of. It's not mentally. It's not like challenging anything, or it's not like I really don't like. It's not a in your face. It is something that you can come back to with, you know, a very laid back kind of vibe. And one other thing that I've been kind of, and this is something that this is more stream related, but one thing that I've actually been noticing, because I've had chances to do it a lot more, is I actually really like, especially when streaming, I've actually really enjoyed the few games that I've been doing that have been solo commentary. Like the games that, like Shadow of the Colossus is a really good example. Is it just a game that I just sit down and play, and it's just me in the chat, and it's just, I'm just poking around at this game. I'm not being guided in any way. I don't have people talking in my ear. It's just me in chat and the game. And I feel like that's something that is a vibe for a stream that I kind of want to go for. Just something that's like, there's not a lot of chatter. It's a lot of just focus. And this is something that I've noted, like, not necessarily no commentary, but something that's like really like more laid back, more, it's focusing on the game. It's, you can have it in the back, like the game is kind of the focus, and I'm just kind of providing some context for it, giving a little bit of flavor. But yeah, something that's more, I really would like to focus on the content and like what I'm looking at, what I can say about it. But also I feel like one thing about solo commentary is that I usually have been like, that was one of the, and that's also one of the things about, that was kind of a thing about the coming up or being raised content creation wise in the Something Awful environment, because that's where Let's Plays, like the classic Let's Plays, came from, which were always, it wasn't one person doing, it was one person hosting a Let's Play, but it was always, there was always other commentators, or a lot of the times a lot of people did commentary, which is when it eventually turned into streaming, that kind of concept moved on to having co-coms. And I've noticed a lot of people more doing solo commentary on streams, or usually having like very specific people. Like if they have someone else in there, it's because it's like a multiplayer game, and obviously they need it. And one thing that I really want to do, because it's something that I feel will help me kind of answer the question of like, what do I want to be? How do I focus on getting positivity? Is I kind of, and it's one thing that's a problem when you're doing co-commentary, is that you kind of, since you're working with other people, you don't have a chance to, like, I always would rely on co-commentary, which kind of limits my, like, ability to kind of form a not quite a persona, but like a personality in terms of like a presentation style. And that's something that I'm going to try and focus on, or that is one thing that I'm going to try and do more, is I want to kind of be able to get out of, or stop using, well, I don't know, stop using as a way to phrase it, essentially do more solo commentary so that I can build up a person, like a, to allow kind of more of a personality to shine. Because I feel like my stream is kind of lacks its personality is a little weird because a lot of it is, I feel like I rely on the styling of my co-commentary or co-commentators, but that I feel is having almost a weird crisis of agency in terms of like who is actually running the show. And I feel like I need to be a little bit more assertive in like, hey, I need to put, and not that I'm just completely like personality devoid, but I want to make sure that I can have direction in terms of what, what kind of content going forward. So that is one thing I will say in terms of streaming as a total, is that I'm going to try and do a lot more solo commentary. For example, I kind of written down, if probably mostly do solo stuff for especially blind playthroughs, long plays, and stuff where I really need to focus on, like if I'm doing a bunch of puzzle games, me just trying to think of stuff is kind of like there's kind of a benefit for having commentary there, but one thing I've noticed is that commentary can really get me frazzled sometimes, so doing that just kind of, I guess, makes a better... I would rather be having the thing be a little bit quieter than me getting frazzled, because I don't want to do that. So, and also I might just occasionally do a stream where I'm just going to do a solo commentary, because I just feel like it would be a better experience. But I am still going to I'm not completely turning off co-commentary, like obviously for multiplayer stuff, which I'll go in later, but I want to do more specifically like Fightcade stuff, especially now that it's looking like Dreamcast is going to be added to Fightcade sometime in the near future, and there is now even talks of a possibility that PlayStation might also be involved. So I'm planning on doing more of like those Fightcade episodes and stuff like Parsec, because those are always fun. And obviously, when I'm doing Retro Rank Rhapsody, sometimes it is good to have co-commentary, so I'll probably do that more there. So yeah, that's kind of general to kind of, if you want to listen in this I guess ramble thing to the too long didn't read. Basically, I'm focusing more on contents that I can be a little bit more positive about, not necessarily a complete absence of bad games, but or quote unquote bad games, but I want the vibe to be laid back, positive, and we are pretty much going to be focusing on retro going forward. And also, I will be doing a lot more solo commentary to kind of force myself to be a little bit more personable, get some better habits, because when you co-com, you kind of start to gain some bad habits. And also, I put some guidelines before, but also sometimes it kind of makes it so that the personalities of the co-coms are the personality of your streams, which I don't have curation over. So, well, I mean, I do have select curation, not to say that my co-coms are like bad or anything, but yeah, it's more, it gets to be me. These are my streams, so I want to, make it more me. So there's your too long didn't read. And also a addendum or a thing going back to the stressful part of this year. I'm going to be shelving Lolotype for the near future. In fact, you probably might have noticed that. I do not have the mental energy to come up with stuff for everything, especially Hazel Town Story, which is very, like, taking up majority of my creative juices, and also trying to come up with that. And also, I don't think that people were super into that, so I'm just going to shelve Lolotype for the time being. Not to say that I won't go do it in the future, but yeah, Lolotype is probably going to be shelved for a good long while. So yeah, there's my general streaming, or at least in my outline I have is general streaming. So yeah, that is what's going forward. So to point out some, I guess, show-specific things, it is actually going back to me having more of a handle on the content. Retro Rank Rhapsody. We are definitely still continuing Retro Ink Rhapsody as going forward. One thing I want to point out very clearly at the front, because it's something that I kind of mentioned, whether or not I was going back and forth on whether or not I want to do it. But I'm going to say now, in putting it in stone, I'm going to be not taking requests going forward, period. There is a few reasons for that, and because I mentioned on my Discord that I would be not taking requests going forward for a few reasons, and here are a little bit more elaborated on those reasons. And I just got some written down. So, for number one, right off the bat, or I would say this is one of the major ones that I kind of felt was, especially for the themes, is that it takes a lot of the schedule to do requests, because if you have like a theme request, which was a relatively cheap at the time thing, a theme's an entire episode, which that's one of 3 episodes, but due to the way I do themes, it's going to be either a Friday or Saturday thing, and I only have a limited amount of days that I stream during a week, so that's taking up a good majority of that, and it's something that I don't really have a whole lot of curation for, and just I like and just due to the way that how many, like, the viewers were, like, it's the amount of points that they had, and also this is the point where I will say I was an economist. That was one of my majors in college. So I have a little bit of experience doing economic stuff, but when it comes down to the stuff that I'm doing as a hobby, I'm not sitting here trying to figure out what this, getting charts out for what I should price my stuff at, and it kind of ended up being that people were buying a lot more requests than I could never put a price down that would get the requests, like, the request always outpaced what I could price it at, and with the way that I had the request being committal, then I felt bad about not getting to it. So that's one reason. Number two, I don't want to say this and have it sound like I'm trying to put particular people on blast. I wasn't a fan of sometimes the games that people were requesting, not because I don't think it's bad that people request games that they like. I feel like there were too many shitposty requests to say, like, a thing, or, like, as a kind of not... actually, no, it was shitposty requests sometimes, and also games that I feel aren't really the kind of games that I'd want to take a look at. Games that are, like, really well known. Like, not to put this one in particular on blast and the person who requested it, but a really good example of this is Daikatana, being one of the first ones. That is a game that a lot of people know of. It is something that's interesting in terms of a historical standpoint, but people know Daikatana is not a great game. There isn't a whole lot that I can add that makes that game better. Getting the Game Boy game, actually, I should take that back. Doing solo the PC one, if I didn't do the Game Boy Color one, that one I feel, just doing the PC one would have been great. But that kind of thing. So actually, that's not exactly a great example. But I feel like sometimes that people were doing games kind of like, there were way too many shitpost. Actually, I shouldn't say that, but I just feel like the requests were not exactly in the spirit that I was kind of hoping for. Also, people that also put this all the push on blast, because this was there's a case where if someone didn't have a whole lot of requests they wanted to do, they were just buying requests for other people, which I felt was going against the spirit of the whole thing. And doing requests via channel points was the best way that I can do it, and I can't really... I could say no, but I always felt bad about doing it. So, yeah, that was another thing that I wasn't a huge fan of request. This next one's a real big one, and this is one that kind of, especially with being a stressful year, doing this was not exactly helping. I was hearing not necessarily in these exact words, but I was hearing a lot of the phrase, we should make Lolo rank X, and like having the, like, oh, let's talk about, we're talking about this bad game. Oh, we should make Lolo take a look at it. Which I didn't appreciate, to be honest, because that just makes me feel like this is a little bit of an exaggeration. It's probably a bit hyperbolic, but I always felt when I heard that like I was the little monkey with the thing and poke and laugh and make fun. That was just something that I always felt bad. If I'm going to be completely honest, like that is going against that positive vibe. That is to doing something and taking a look at it in a negative light. That is making me play something that I am not going to enjoy. I don't think that's against the spirit of how I want to do things, and I wasn't appreciative of that. So that was a big one. That why I didn't. One of my reasons for doing that. Two or not two. This is the fourth one. Another one is, and this is a lighter one, is a lot of these games that people are requesting are from games that they're familiar with their like childhood. Which I had my childhood. I didn't have yours. So which is more to say, when I'm reviewing it, I don't really have like a lot of like, especially if it's a game I don't know. Like I'm just looking at this game, like this game's usually just all right, and I always feel kind of bad. It's like this is a game that a lot of people played as kids, and I just kind of it's like it's a game. So yeah, there's that, and it's usually a lot of people are requesting DOS and PC games, which are always a real pain in the ass to set up, at least with the way that I have things set up, and that was kind of an annoying thing. But that obviously that's more like I kind of have to take a look at those kind of games because those are retro and there's a lot of interesting things there. And I really shouldn't complain about that, but also it was a lot of effort trying to track it down some of the stuff that was more that I played. And it's like it's all right. This was also I should say this has happened very rarely. And also this is another one I actually didn't have to write down. But I would have one thing that I've had this happen before, and I don't want this to happen in the future, is people messaging me when I would get to certain things. And that always puts me that always makes me just a smidge anxious. So I'm not a huge fan of that. So that's also another reason. Also another thing, and this is also a subset of the request, is I don't think I ever clarified themes that well. Because I just said, just give it a theme. And I didn't really clarify about what I meant. So you would have a few people, like a lot of people got it. There were a lot of good themes, like just one that came to mind, Games That Start Bears. That's an open-ended one that gives me a lot of room to work with. Game starting celebrities was a weird one because the spirit of the request was good, although it turned out there weren't a whole lot there. So that ended up being, also the games weren't that particularly stellar. But then there were some requests that were for themes were a little bit too more specific, but also I didn't really have a good grounds other than just saying no that I didn't want to turn down. But I feel like people were requesting themes for getting specific games, which is against the spirit of what I wanted to do with themes, because if you wanted to request specific games, you needed to request it through that channel and not just getting it through this other one, which I think was just like circumventing my thing, which I'm doing this as a side thing. I don't want to have to come up with rules and regulations to kind of do this one side fun thing. So that was a little bit annoying. But yes, so long story short, I'm going to not do requests for a good long while. One, so that I can curate my own the content that I want to show off, and two, just because I don't have a good way of doing requests or having people request stuff that one I feel is what that I feel good about having, that because it's either too wishy-washy or it's not. It's just way too strict. So for the time being, requests are dead, essentially. And it's also not to say that anything that has been requested is not going to do. I have everything that was requested. I actually cleared out the queue, and it is anything that was requested is going to get done at some point. but I have a vector for it getting done, but nothing going forward in terms of adding stuff. So yeah, there's request done. Unfortunately about that, but yeah, I just had to do it for, makes me feel a little bit better and less stressed. So there's that. Also, another thing about Retro Ink Rhapsody that I'm going to do, and this is more of how I schedule things. It's a very minor thing, but when I do a traditional Retro Ink Rhapsody episode, I have been in the past aiming for usually 6 shortest games. The thing about that is that I don't feel like that gives enough time to the game in question that I feel like I have to kind of rush through, or I just have to stop prematurely. So one thing I am going to do going forward is for games or episodes involving shorter games, I want to focus on fewer games in general, no more than 4 going forward, because I want to give more time to the game. Because also it's been brought to my attention that I do a game and then I play it and I'm like, oh, I like this game. And then almost immediately, or like the next section after I stop, is where the game starts to become less fun. And I'm trying to avoid having that be a recurring thing with me. So I want to give games a little bit more time to, just toy around with and play more. Also, speaking of play, I know it is a, I don't want to say tradition, but it is a staple of my channel that I like to use Rewind a lot. So that I can get through a game and you can see more of it. I want to try and rewind less. The reason I want to do is because I feel like I am getting a little bit too complacent with the rewind, and it really makes me play sloppy, which is not a great experience, because I'm essentially, I can just rush headfirst into stuff, and that's not a good way of looking at a game. And also, it really trivializes, like, seeing, oh, what happens when you lose in a game? Well, I don't see that a lot because I end up rewinding a lot. So I want to try and actually, disable rewind for, like, the start. And I actually want to, prove that I actually, when it comes down to it, I can, in fact, play games good. But, yeah, rewinding makes me a bit lazy in terms of my play. So I want to be a better player, so to speak. So I'm going to try and disable rewind or do ways that I can't rewind. We'll see about that in the future. So that's kind of what I have written down for Retro Ink Rhapsody. Although I had this under future content, although it really should fit with Retro Ink Rhapsody, I really want to do more Fightcade stuff. I want to do more races. I want to bring races back because those were always good. And it's a good bit of content. They're very lively. And speaking of better play, then I can, do that. So that's one thing that I was thinking of doing. So that's Retro Ink Rhapsody down. Next up, we got Media Delta. So, one thing that just a quick, and this is more of an advertisement, for Media Delta, because sometimes it's good to watch these movies that we're doing for Media Delta as a group. That way, people who are all on the episode can, get a similar experience. So I feel like some people are watching it in groups, some are not. So to kind of get a little bit more of a cohesive experience and to make sure that we're all watching the same thing, I've been showing the stuff that I do for Media Delta on my Discord channel, which if you are not a member of the Discord channel, you can go to discord.ldpoutlife. You just put that in your browser and it'll tell you how to get to the Discord channel. So there's a little plug there. And one thing that has come up a bunch of times in the actual episodes themselves and just me having conversation with people is that one thing that was a thing that was part of the descriptor for Media Delta, like what would be covered, what is part of the scope of Media Delta, was that it had to either be explicitly, the media in question had to be explicitly based on a game, or it had to have a game based on it, which is always a clunky way of describing it. And eventually, at some point, I ended up putting things in or doing stuff for Media Delta that wasn't exactly related, and that scope was shaky, or starting to get a little bit shaky. But I now have a descriptor, and I'm now changing the definition of the scope for Media Delta to as follows. the descriptor for what is Media Delta. Media Delta, it is a podcast for media that themselves are not games, but are culturally game-related. That's a description. There's our scope for Media Delta. What does Media Delta cover? It covers media that are not games themselves, but are culturally game-related. This covers stuff like, say, for example, Streets of Fire. This covers stuff like Phenomena, which didn't have a game explicitly on it, but it was based on Clock Tower. Or Clock Tower was heavily based on it. The Guyver, for example, we got like One Bloody Roar had it. It was one of the first things David Hayter, voice of Solid Snake for Metal Gear Solid, did. So it's games related. Even Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. It's Beat Takeshi, who was in Takeshi's Challenge, was in that movie. Ryuichi Sakamoto, who won Yellow Magic Orchestra, was heavily influenced on, or was a heavy influence for a lot of people doing game music. And Ryuichi Sakamoto did games himself, or composed stuff for games himself. And, you know, Merry Christmas, well, the theme for it was used in International Karate. So it's culturally games related. And this opens up the back door for a lot of things. And I feel like it is a scope that is both broad, but also limited. There is a limit. There is a clear limit to what can be accepted in Media Delta if it is culturally game related. So that is something going forward that I came up with that basically gives Media Delta its scope. So figured out that, and that is good. So that's Media Delta is going to continue as it is going forward. So there's that. And that leaves us to Hazel Town Story. So we just finished, actually the last, what would have been Hazel Town Story episode that got uploaded, was the last of our first quote-unquote arc, although it's technically 3 arcs. Our first set of sessions that were involved with that set of mini arcs itself was kind of its own arc. That is now complete. And kind of to go over my thoughts on that arc, part of that arc was to test out the new game system that we use, that we kind of homebrewed. And the game system was actually really good. I really liked it, and I didn't have to change a whole lot. I had to get used to things like XP, like divvying that out. But yeah, for the most part, the engine itself was good. I wasn't a huge fan of that flow, though. So I wasn't a huge fan of the 3 arcs because it really split the group, and it kind of made the flow of the whole arc itself kind of weird. So I wasn't a huge fan of that. So going forward, new arcs are going to be singular stories. You're going to be single. There might be multiple things you have to do in that story, but it's going to be single story. You're not splitting off like for the last one. You're not doing the robotics stuff. Then you're not doing the author stuff, and you're not doing the Canary Group stuff. It's all going to be tied into one story, just broader, maybe. So that's what to expect from Media Delta, or Media Delta, Hazel Town Story. Next episode will be the next thing that's in the Hazel Town Story slot. Well, it should be a Media Delta or a Hazel Town Story. I really say Media Delta instead of Hazel Town Story. It'll be a scripted episode that is having to deal with the Hazel Town crew, or I should say Team Reading Rainbow now. They're kind of it's a slice of life thing with how they're dealing with how their region, how Seedbearer handles Halloween. Because that region just recently started celebrating it because of the whole bunch of immigration that they've had. So it's about how the crew handle, like, what are their Halloween, what stuff are they getting into on Halloween? So that's what should be coming up next. And then after that, I don't think, and actually this is something I should bring up, I am not recording, we are no longer doing streams of Hazel Town Story because, 1, I don't think people were interested, and 2, it's kind of cannibalistic to have them streamed, but then also expect people to listen to the recorded stuff, because usually people do one or the other. So it's just going to be available recorded now. So there's that. Also, it gives the people who are doing it a little bit more flexibility on when they can record. So they're not just stuck to always Fridays at normal stream time. So that's that going forward. Also, this is something that I am not tying myself to. This is something that I've had in the back of my mind. Something that I've been thinking about is I know that I've talked to a few people, and a lot of people have been saying about interested in a tabletop game. Like a lot of people say, oh, I really want to play a tabletop game, that Hazel Town Story might be a good fit for them. So one thing I might potentially do, or think about doing in the future, is I'm kind of curious what it would be to have a second Hazel Town group. Run a second group of people that's not, the people that have been Hazel Town's group, Torpo, Carnival, DM, who have been here since the beginning, and like Bob and Axe and Rhapsody, who are kind of also in that group as well. Running just a different group, period, and different set of characters, and seeing how they would handle, the stuff that I throw at the other group. I don't know if I would do the same, like, rehash stuff that I've done, campaigns that I've done before, but yeah, that is something I've also been thinking about. So that might be something that happens in the future. Who knows? And yeah, that is all the updates I have in Hazel Town Story, and really, looking at my outline, that's kind of it in terms of a content update. So that's really going to be it. Another thing that I will say going forward is, and this is more to tease an upcoming event. The last few months, I will say, is just to give a teaser what's coming up, especially if you're listening to this as it's coming out, is I've been working on a new overlay, and with that, a new kind of thing that, like, one thing you might notice from the stream is I have me in the corner that's like kind of doing a PNG tuber thing. But now, with new overlay, I might, in like talking about more of personality, I might need to, might be a bit more personable in certain ways. So that's kind of changing how I am viewing the content going forward. So there is, I mentioned that I'm going back to retro stuff, and that it's more of me going back to what my strengths are. But that does not necessarily mean that stuff going forward will be the same old, same old. I am always interested in looking at new things in terms of retro. I really want to do more episodes that are like that one Batman Returns thing, which is taking a look at a bunch of games that have the same name. Taking a look at episodes that are just focused on one game that's all of its ports. And just kind of taking a look at stuff we ranked before, because it's there's stuff that we've ranked that have been stuff that we looked at in the early episodes that, stuff that, needs to take a look at again. So yeah, I've been talking, I'm looking at Audacity for about 49 minutes straight. Technically 48 and a half, but, rounding up a little bit. And also I recorded 15 minutes of this before, and then I didn't end up using it. So my throat is getting sore, and I really have run out of things to say. So I will just end with saying thank you all for if you've been engaging with the content at all. I don't have any problem with you only just taking a look at a few, or like being with you for only a short time and only taking a look at certain things. But if you've enjoyed my content at all, I am happy for it. And I really hope that just my stuff is at least I hope it's fulfilling in some way. So I will say with that, again, thank you all for listening. And if you've been listening to this entire thing, you had the patience of a saint. And I say thank you for listening and, being there. Because I really appreciate it. I want to make sure that's certain, is I really appreciate those that have kind of stuck with me throughout the years and, have just been there. Even if you're there for a short while, I really appreciate it. So, again, finally, thank you all for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful whatever time zone it is when you're listening to this. Goodbye.